The ring caught the morning light and scattered it like broken promises across the marble floor. Arthur Pendleton stood in his own foyer watching his future wife hold up her hand, showing off the diamond that was supposed to save him from 5 years of crushing loneliness. The stone blazed. It shouted. It demanded attention from everyone in the room, and then a child's voice, barely louder than breath, cut through everything. Das ist nicht echt. This isn't real. Perfect German, flawless accent, coming from a 10-year-old girl nobody was looking at. Arthur's blood turned to ice. Stick till the end. At 80%, there's a reveal you won't see coming. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories like this one. His name meant something in Chicago. Arthur Pendleton. 65 years of building an empire from nothing. His signature on university libraries. His face in boardrooms where fortunes were made and lost before lunch. Money that could move markets. Power that opened any door. But none of it could bring back Eleanor. Cancer had taken her slowly. 5 years ago. Piece by piece until there was nothing left but silence in a house too big for one person. The hallways echoed. The rooms felt cold even in summer. He walked through his days like a ghost haunting his own life. Until Isabella. 6 months ago she had appeared at a charity gala. Dark hair, bright eyes. A laugh that reminded him joy still existed in the world. She knew art the way he did. She could talk about his maritime collection for hours. She listened when he spoke about Eleanor. She didn't try to replace his dead wife. She just offered him a reason to stop dying alongside her memory. Tonight was supposed to be their celebration, an engagement party, 200 guests, the best champagne, an announcement that Arthur Pendleton was choosing life again. The house buzzed with preparation. White orchids everywhere, their scent almost choking. Silver trays polished until they could cut light into pieces. Caterers in crisp uniforms moving like soldiers. The string quartet setting up in the ballroom. Everything perfect. Everything expensive. Everything exactly as it should be. Arthur adjusted his tie in the gilded mirror by the grand staircase. The reflection showed a tired man in a $10,000 suit. Deep lines around his eyes. Silver hair perfectly cut. A face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile without effort. He felt it then. That cold weight in his chest. Doubt. Was this right? Was it too soon? Was he betraying Eleanor's memory? He pushed the thought away. It was just fear. The fear of letting go. The fear of being happy again. Isabella made him feel alive. That had to be enough. Helen walked past carrying fresh linens. His maid. 12 years she'd worked for him. Quiet, efficient. A steady presence through Eleanor's illness and the hollow years after. She never asked for anything, never complained. Just did her job with a dignity that made him respect her more than most of the wealthy people he knew. Beside Helen walked her daughter, Clara. 10 years old with hair the color of wheat and eyes like winter sky. Pale, thin, always watching, always quiet. The kind of child you could forget was in the room until you turned around and found her staring at you with those old eyes. She was smart. Helen had mentioned it once, top of her class. But there was something about the girl that unsettled Arthur. She carried herself like someone much older, like she'd seen things children shouldn't see. Right now she was holding a dust cloth and looking at nothing in particular. Just a maid's daughter doing what maid's daughters do. Invisible. Unimportant. Isabella descended the staircase then. She moved like she owned the space. Red lipstick. Silk dress that probably cost more than Helen made in a month. Perfume that announced her arrival before she spoke. Arthur, darling. She kissed his cheek. Left a mark. Everything is coming together perfectly. The champagne just arrived from France. The sommelier says it's the best vintage in a decade. She held out her left hand. The ring. It was massive. A diamond so large it looked fake, even though Arthur had paid enough to buy a small house. The dealer said it had once belonged to European royalty, papers and certificates and a story about how it had survived 2 world wars hidden in a monastery. Isn't it magnificent in the morning light? The stone caught the sun streaming through the tall windows. It exploded with color. Rainbows danced across the marble. The fire inside the diamond seemed alive. "It's beautiful, my dear," Arthur said. His voice sounded wrong even to himself. Helen had paused her work nearby. She was polishing a silver tray. Clara stood beside her mother. The little girl's gaze locked onto Isabella's hand. Her expression didn't change. No smile. No wonder. Just intense focus. Isabella noticed. She gave a little laugh. Sharp at the edges. "It's quite something, isn't it?" she said to Clara, talking down to the child the way wealthy people do. "One day a handsome prince will give you one just like it." Clara didn't respond. She leaned closer to her mother, her small frame almost hidden behind Helen's uniform. She whispered. So soft Arthur almost missed it. But he didn't miss it, he heard every word. "Das ist nicht echt." This isn't real. Perfect German. Arthur froze. His heart stopped beating for one long, terrible second. He and Eleanor had spoken German constantly. It was their private language. A piece of her childhood in Berlin that she'd brought to America. They'd whispered in German in bed, argued in German when they didn't want staff to understand, made love in German because some things only sounded right in her native tongue. He understood those 4 words as clearly as if they'd been screamed. Isabella hadn't understood. She only spoke English and enough Italian to order wine. She just saw a shy child and smiled indulgently. Helen gently touched her daughter's shoulder. A silent command to be quiet. Her face showed nothing, but Arthur had heard. And the cold weight in his chest had just become a mountain. He looked from the brilliant shouting stone on Isabella's hand to the serious, unwavering eyes of the 10-year-old girl who had just spoken a truth he couldn't begin to process. The morning had just started, but his world was already ending. He moved through the next hour like a man underwater. Everything felt distant, muffled. He approved flower arrangements without seeing them. He confirmed the evening's menu without tasting the samples. He smiled and nodded and spoke words that meant nothing, because his mind was caught on that whisper. It was insane. A child's fantasy. What would a 10-year-old know about diamonds? Especially a diamond like that one. Certified, appraised, sourced by the most reputable dealer in the country. It had papers. It had provenance. It had a story that went back centuries. A child couldn't possibly know, could she? He found Isabella in the ballroom directing the placement of tables. She was in her element, commanding, confident. She saw him, and her whole face lit up. "There you are. I was just deciding we should put the guest of honor table by the French doors. The view of the gardens will be stunning as the sun sets." "Stunning," Arthur echoed. The word felt hollow. He watched that ring catch light from the crystal chandeliers. It scattered rainbows across the polished floor. It looked real. It felt real when he'd held it the day it arrived. The weight, the coldness, everything about it screamed authenticity. "Are you all right, darling?" Isabella's brow furrowed with concern. She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You seem distracted." "Just a lot on my mind," he said, pulling away. "The arrangements, I want everything perfect for you." Her expression softened into something that looked like love. "It already is perfect. Because I have you." The words were flawless, the delivery perfect. But for the first time, Arthur heard something beneath the surface. A sense of performance, like watching a talented actress deliver lines she'd rehearsed 1,000 times. The thought felt like betrayal. This woman had pulled him from the depths of grief. She'd given him a reason to wake up in the morning. She'd made him feel like life was worth living again. He owed her his trust. He owed her everything. And yet, that whisper. He excused himself, claiming he needed to make a phone call. His study was his sanctuary, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the smell of old paper and leather and pipe tobacco from years ago when he still smoked. Eleanor's favorite room. Her portrait hung over the fireplace, her smile gentle. her eyes knowing. He often felt her presence here. Today the room felt cold as a tomb. He looked at her portrait, at the simple gold band on her painted finger. A ring that was real in ways that had nothing to do with carats or clarity or royal provenance. He needed to understand. He buzzed the staff intercom. "Helen, could you please come to the study?" She appeared moments later, hands clasped, expression calm but questioning. "Yes, Mr. Pendleton. Please come in. Close the door." She obeyed. Arthur tried to keep his voice casual, professional. "Helen, I need to ask you about Clara. Her German is very good. Does she take lessons?" A flicker of something crossed Helen's face. Worry, fear. It was gone before he could name it. "No, sir. No lessons." "Then where did she learn it?" Arthur pressed. Helen hesitated. She looked down at her hands. "From my father, sir." "Her grandfather?" "Yes. He was German. He passed away 2 years ago. He and Clara were very close. He spoke to her in German from the time she was a baby. It was their special language. This explained the fluency, but it didn't explain the content. "Will you come down and talk with me for a moment?" She nodded, carefully marked her page before closing the heavy book. She placed it back on the shelf with a reverence that touched him, climbed down with practiced ease and came to sit in the large leather armchair opposite him. Her feet didn't touch the floor. He leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees, looking directly into her clear, serious eyes. "Clara, earlier this morning in the foyer, I heard what you said to your mother in German." She flinched, gaze dropping to her lap. "I'm not angry," he said quickly. "I just need to understand." "How did you know?" She was silent for a long time, small hands twisting in her lap. He waited patiently. He knew this was important. He knew he had to let her speak in her own time. Finally she looked up. Expression grave. "Opa taught me," she whispered. He had pictures in a big book. Pictures of the real crown jewels and the fakes the Nazis made. He said, "You have to look at the light. The real ones, they drink the light. They have fire deep inside. The fake ones just bounce it back. They're like glass. They're loud, but the inside is quiet." She took a shaky breath. When she, the lady, held her hand out, the light from the window hit the stone. It bounced. It was too perfect, too bright. It was shouting. "Opa always said real beauty whispers, my treasure." Arthur sat back, stunned by the simple, profound poetry of her explanation. Real beauty whispers. He thought of Eleanor's simple ring. It had whispered. Isabella's ring shouted from across the room. "There's more," Clara said, her confidence growing now that he was truly listening. "The edges. On a real diamond that old, the cut wouldn't be so sharp. The edges of the facets would be softer. Time wears everything down, even the hardest things. Her stone has edges like a new knife. It hasn't lived. It was just born." He stared at her. This child who spoke of the erosion of time on gemstone facets, who understood the difference between a stone that drinks light and one that merely reflects it. Helen was right. Her father hadn't just taught her a party trick. He had given her a way of seeing the world, a way of seeing truth. In that moment, Arthur knew he didn't need to wait for Sam Finch. He already had his answer. The 10-year-old daughter of his maid had seen what he, with all his wealth and experience and power, had refused to see. He was engaged to a fraud, and his entire world was a lie. The hours until Sam's arrival dragged like years. Arthur moved through his house on autopilot. The opulent rooms felt like a stage set for a play where he was the unwilling star. Every interaction with Isabella was fraught with terrible new awareness. He watched her supervise the final touches on floral centerpieces, laughing with the florist, correcting the angle of a single rose, moving with the confidence of someone who already owned this space. She wasn't just a guest in this house. She saw herself as its future mistress. The thought sent ice through his veins. He saw it now. Things he'd been too blind to notice before. The subtle way she directed staff. The casualness with which she used his private accounts for party expenses. The way her eyes would scan a room not with appreciation but with assessment. She wasn't building a life with him. She was acquiring assets. They had lunch on the terrace. Light meal prepared by his chef. The food tasted like ash in his mouth. You're so quiet today, Arthur, Isabella said, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. She reached across the small table and placed her hand over his. The ring was there, cold, heavy weight between their skin. Are you having second thoughts? A little pre-wedding jitters? She smiled. A playful, knowing expression, a look that had once charmed him. Now it looked like the calculating smile of a predator. No, of course not, he lied, the words like ash in his mouth. Just want everything perfect. It will be, she assured him, squeezing his hand. By tonight everyone will know. Mrs. Isabella Pendleton. It has a lovely ring to it, don't you think? He simply nodded, unable to speak. The name felt like violation, like desecration of Eleanor's memory. At precisely 4 o'clock the doorbell chimed. Sam Finch had arrived, and Arthur Pendleton was about to learn the truth that would destroy everything. Arthur needed to get the ring from Isabella without raising suspicion. This would be the most difficult performance of his life. He found her in the master suite, looking over the dress she planned to wear that evening. Stunning crimson silk that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Isabella, my dear, he said, forcing warmth into his tone. I had an idea. Something a bit sentimental, she turned, face lighting up. Oh, what is it, darling? My jeweler Sam Finch is here. He's an old family friend, reviewing the insurance on some of Eleanor's pieces. I thought it might be a beautiful gesture if he added your ring to the Pendleton family policy, officially making it part of the collection before our announcement tonight, a new heirloom to begin our new life. He watched her face carefully. For a fraction of a second he saw it. Pure, unadulterated panic in her eyes, gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a radiant smile, but he had seen it. Oh, Arthur, how thoughtful, she said, voice a little too bright. But is that really necessary right now? The man is here for your late wife's things. It feels awkward. And we have guests arriving in just a few hours. Can it wait? Her resistance was the final nail in the coffin. It will only take a moment, Arthur insisted, gently but firmly. It's important to me, Isabella. A formality but a meaningful one. Please. She couldn't refuse without revealing herself. To argue further would be to admit she had something to hide. She slipped the ring from her finger. Movement stiff, of course, darling, if it's important to you. She placed it in his palm. It felt unnervingly light. I'll be back in a few minutes, he said. Arthur. Her voice was sharp. Don't be long. He walked out, the ring clutched in his hand, his heart a cold, hard knot in his chest. Samuel Finch stood by the fireplace in the study, a man in his late 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles and steady hands. He had been a rock for Arthur after Eleanor's death. Sam, Arthur said, closing the doors behind him. Thank you for coming. Of course, Arthur. So this is the piece? Arthur opened his hand, placed the ring on the polished mahogany of his desk. It sat under the warm light of the desk lamp, blazing with fire. To a layman's eye, it was utterly perfect. Sam picked it up. He didn't reach for his loupe immediately. Instead, he did something Arthur found strange. He closed his eyes and simply held it, feeling its weight and temperature in his palm, turning it over and over with his thumb. The setting is new, Sam murmured, eyes still closed. Excellent craftsmanship, platinum, very fine work. Then he opened his eyes, brought the ring closer, squinted. A small frown touched his lips. He reached into his waistcoat pocket and pulled out his jeweler's loupe, fitted it to his eye and bent over the ring. Focus absolute. The silence stretched. Each tick of the grandfather clock a hammer blow against Arthur's nerves. He stood perfectly still, barely breathing, watching his friend examine the symbol of his future. Sam spent a long time looking, turned the ring, studied the facets, held it up to light, then angled it away. Finally, he put the loupe down, soft click against the desk. He looked up at Arthur. The expression on his face was deep, professional, sorrow. He didn't need to say a word. Arthur already knew. It's moissanite, isn't it? Arthur asked, his voice dead and emotionless. Sam nodded slowly. A spectacular one of the best fakes I've ever seen in 45 years in this business. The cut is designed to mimic an old mine cut, but it's too precise, too perfect. And the fire. A diamond has balance of brilliance and fire. Moissanite has more fire, that excessive rainbow effect. It tries too hard. He picked up the stone again. The average person, even a wealthy collector, would be fooled. The certificates were likely for a real stone that was switched out. It's a classic high-level con. Arthur, I am so sorry. The words were calm, clinical, but they landed like punches. Arthur felt the air leave his lungs. He sank into his desk chair. Strength gone from his legs. He looked at the ring. This glittering, beautiful lie, it had cost him millions, but the money was nothing. The real cost was his hope. The real cost was the shattering of the belief that he could find happiness again. What is it worth, Sam? The setting is worth a few thousand. The stone itself? A few hundred? Maybe. He had traded his heart for a few $100s. The anger came then, hot and pure, not just at Isabella but at himself, at his weakness, his foolish, desperate loneliness. He had almost handed over his life, his legacy, his name to a woman for a piece of beautifully cut silicon carbide. He stood up, resolve hardening into steel. "Thank you, Sam," he said, voice firm and cold. "Would you mind waiting here? I have one final piece of business to attend to." Arthur walked through the grand hallway, his footsteps echoing on marble. The house alive with frantic preparations for a party that would never happen. He found Isabella in the ballroom, glass of champagne already in her hand, talking to the string quartet leader. When she saw him approaching, her face broke into a dazzling smile. "There you are, darling. I was getting worried. Is everything all right with your jeweler?" "Everything is perfect," Arthur said, voice dangerously quiet. He took the champagne from her hand, placed it on a nearby table, turned to the musician. "Thank you, Mr. Dubose. Your services will not be required this evening. My assistant will see that you're paid in full. You and your quartet may leave." The musician blinked, confused. "He taught her more than just the language, didn't he?" Arthur's voice dropped low. Helen looked up. He saw conflict in her eyes, loyalty to her employer fighting with fierce protective love for her daughter. "My father was a very particular man, sir. He believed in seeing things for what they truly are. He taught Clara to be observant. Observant enough to judge the quality of diamonds?" The question came out sharper than he intended. Helen's back straightened. "My father's name was Michael Vance," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Sergeant Michael Vance. During the Second World War, he was with the Allied forces. He was one of the men assigned to the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program." Arthur stared at her. The Monuments men. He knew the history. The special unit tasked with rescuing priceless art and cultural treasures stolen by the Nazis. They were heroes. Scholars in uniform who saved civilization itself while bombs fell around them. He spent years recovering stolen art, Helen continued, her voice gaining strength. Part of his job was identifying forgeries. The Nazis were masters of deception. They faked paintings, sculptures, jewelry. My father became an expert. He could spot a fake from 20 paces. He used to say, "You don't look at the object. You look at the story it tells. The tiny mistakes, the lack of soul." She paused. He loved Clara more than anything in the world. He didn't have money to leave her. No property. Nothing valuable. But he left her what he knew. He taught her everything. How to see. How to look past surfaces and find truth. It was their game. He would show her pictures of paintings, of jewelry, and ask her in German on "What is real, my treasure?" The study was silent. Arthur felt ice spreading through his veins. This wasn't a child's fantasy. This was a legacy, a skill passed down from a war hero to his grandchild. A man whose entire life's work had been distinguishing the real from the fake, who had saved masterpieces from destruction by learning to see what others couldn't. He looked back at Eleanor's portrait. Her painted eyes seemed to hold deep sadness. He had been so lost in loneliness, so desperate to fill the void she'd left. Had he been blind? Had he chosen to see only what he wanted to see? "Thank you, Helen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's all." She nodded once and left. The door closed softly behind her. Arthur was alone again, but the room felt different now. It wasn't just grief filling the space. It was terrible growing, certainty. The little girl with wheat-colored hair and winter eyes hadn't been whispering fantasy. She had been stating fact. The seed of doubt once planted grew with terrifying speed. Arthur's mind, trained for decades to analyze business deals and spot weaknesses in contracts, now turned inward, examining the past 6 months with brutal clarity. He thought about his first meetings with Isabella. She'd been introduced by a mutual acquaintance. Someone he barely knew when he really thought about it. A friend of a friend who'd said Isabella was new to Chicago and could use connections in the art world. She had been incredibly knowledgeable about his collection, specifically his 18th century maritime art. A very niche, very specific interest. She'd praised his taste, his eye for detail. She'd known which pieces were rare, which were valuable, had her knowledge been genuine, or meticulously researched. He remembered conversations about her family. She'd spoken of tragedy. Parents lost young in a car accident. A modest inheritance spent on education at a prestigious boarding school in Switzerland. It was a sad story, one that had made him feel protective of her. One that had made him want to give her the stability she'd lost, but it was also a story, with no verifiable details, no names, no places, just vague romantic tragedy. Then there were the finances. She had never asked him for money directly. She was too clever for that. But there had been suggestions. An investment opportunity in a new gallery that sounded promising. A rare painting she knew was coming up for private sale. A chance to get in on the ground floor of an emerging artist. He had made the investments, bought the painting, transferred significant sums to accounts she controlled. He had done it out of love, he told himself. But looking back, it felt less like gift and more like transaction. The ring was the centerpiece of it all, the ultimate symbol. He had wanted the best for her. He'd contacted his family's longtime jeweler, a man named Samuel Finch, whose father had made wedding bands for Eleanor decades ago. Samuel had known Arthur since he was a child. Samuel understood what jewelry meant to the Pendleton family, but Isabella had insisted on using her own specialist. A man from Europe, she'd said. Someone who understood the unique history of rare estate pieces. Samuel is wonderful for modern things, darling, she had said with a dismissive wave. But for a stone with this kind of history, you need a true expert. Someone who deals exclusively in royal provenance. Arthur, eager to impress, had agreed. He had wired the money to an overseas account. The ring had been delivered by bonded courier a week later, complete with impressive certificates and appraisals, documents that looked official, stories that sounded true. He had never questioned it. Why would he? He was in love. His intercom buzzed. He nearly jumped out of his chair. It was Robert, head of household staff. Mr. Pendleton, forgive the interruption. Mr. Finch is on the line. He says it's his annual call to review the insurance policies on your late wife's jewelry collection. Shall I put him through? Arthur's heart stopped. Samuel. Samuel always called this time of year. A routine call to review policies and make sure everything was properly insured. Arthur had almost forgotten about it with all the party preparations. But now it felt like Providence, like Eleanor herself was reaching across death to help him. Yes, Arthur said, his voice steady despite the frantic beating in his chest. Put him through, Robert. Thank you. A moment later, a familiar voice came through the speaker. Warm, steady, trustworthy. Arthur, Sam Finch here. Hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Sam, Arthur said. The word came out with more relief than he intended. No, not at all. It's good to hear your voice, Gaul. Just doing my yearly due diligence. Reviewing the policy on Eleanor's pieces. Everything is in order, of course. But I did hear some news. A little bird told me congratulations are in order. Arthur's hand tightened on his desk. Yes, I'm getting married again, Sam. Well, that's wonderful news. I'm happy for you, Arthur. She must be very special. I trust her ring is properly insured. This was it. The moment of truth. Arthur took a deep breath. That's actually something I was hoping you could help me with. Sam, it's a bit last minute. He tried to keep his voice level. Professional. My fiancé and I are hosting a party tonight to announce the engagement. I would feel much better if the ring was appraised for our own policy before the event. For peace of mind, there was a slight pause. Tonight, Arthur? That's very short notice. My schedule is packed, I know, and I apologize. But it would be a great favor. Name your price, Sam. I'll have a car waiting. It's a significant piece. It needs the best eye. It needs your eye. Sam was quiet for a long moment. He was old school, valued trust and relationships over rushed jobs. But Arthur had known him for 40 years. Samuel had appraised every piece of jewelry Arthur had ever bought for Eleanor, had helped him choose her engagement ring, had been at the funeral. All right, Arthur, Sam said finally. For you, I'll move some things around. I can be there around 4. Will that work? 4 is perfect, Arthur said. Relief hit him so hard it made him dizzy. Thank you, Sam. Truly, he hung up. The clock on his mantle read 11:30. He had 4.5 hours. 4.5 hours until he knew for certain if he was the biggest fool in Chicago. But first he needed to talk to the little girl who had started all of this. He needed to understand exactly what she had seen. Found Clara in the library. The vast 2-story room was Arthur's pride. Floor-to-ceiling shelves holding first editions and rare manuscripts. A rolling ladder that slid on brass rails. Windows that stretched 15 feet high, letting in streams of dusty sunlight. Clara was halfway up the ladder, a heavy book resting in her lap. So absorbed she didn't hear him enter. He walked quietly until he stood at the base of the ladder. Clara, he said softly. She looked down, blue eyes wide with surprise. Fear flickered across her face. She thought she was in trouble for being in here. It's all right, Arthur said gently. You're not in trouble. May I ask what you're reading? She held up the book so he could see the spine. An introduction to gemology. An old academic text from his own university. Days. Dense. Technical. Not exactly children's literature. It's very interesting, she said, her voice small. It talks about inclusions and refractive index. My Opa, my grandfather, he said that's how you tell their stories. The flaws are the most important part. They tell you where the stone has been. Arthur's throat felt tight. Sir, but the guests. There will be no guests, Arthur said. Eyes locked on Isabella. Her smile faltered, uncertainty replacing its brilliance. Arthur, what on earth are you talking about? Is this some kind of joke? Oh, it's a surprise, all right, Arthur said. He took her by the elbow. Grip surprisingly strong. Not a lover's touch. The grip of an arresting officer. Walk with me. He led her from the ballroom, past stunned staff, past bewildered musicians. Her confusion rapidly turning to anger. Let go of me, Arthur. You're hurting my arm. What has gotten into you? He didn't answer until they were back in the foyer. Standing on the very spot where hours before a little girl's whisper had shattered his world. He released her arm, reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring, held it out on his palm. Your ring, he said, voice flat. She looked at it, then back at him, brow furrowed. Darling, I don't understand. Did your friend not approve? Is it not grand enough? We can get another, a bigger one if you like. The final desperate gambit of a cornered liar. He approved of it a great deal, Arthur said, humorless smile touching his lips. He called it one of the finest fakes he's ever seen, a truly spectacular piece of moissanite, worth perhaps a few $100s. The color drained from Isabella's face. For the first time since he'd known her, the mask slipped completely. He saw the real woman beneath. Hard, cold, terrified. That's absurd, she stammered, voice losing its melodic quality. Your man is a fool. This ring is certified. It has papers. The papers are for a different stone entirely, Arthur continued, voice relentless. A classic bait and switch, a con you've likely perfected over many years and many foolish, lonely old men. But you made a mistake here. You underestimated my household. Her eyes darted around, seeking escape. I don't know what you're talking about. You're being cruel. You're breaking my heart. Tears welled in her eyes. A month ago they would have shattered him. Now he saw them for what they were, Celine and strategy. Stop, he said, the single word cutting like a blade. The performance is over. He took a step closer. Get out. You will leave this house now. You will take nothing but the clothes you're wearing. One of my security staff will escort you to the gate. If you ever try to contact me or come near my property again, I will use the full force of the law against you. My lawyers are already freezing the accounts and recovering the assets you stole. You are finished. She stared at him. Face a mask of disbelief and fury. You'll regret this, she hissed, voice venomous. You'll be a lonely old man in this mausoleum rattling around with your ghosts. This house was never dead, Arthur countered, voice like ice. It was just quiet. And you are not life, you're just noise. Loud, expensive, and empty. He turned his back on her. Ultimate dismissal. Walked away. Didn't look back as he heard her begin to scream. Didn't look back as security approached. He just kept walking toward his study. Toward the silence which for the first time in 5 years felt like peace. 6 months later, the Pendleton estate was quiet again. But it was a different kind of silence. Peaceful, contemplative. The grand rooms, once monuments to lonely past, were now filled with soft sounds of life. Arthur and Clara spent their afternoons in the library. Their grand project to recatalog every piece in the Pendleton collection. She taught him to read the stories he had only owned, to see the history he had only collected. Helen now managed the entire estate with newfound confidence. They were no longer just employer and employees. They were family, forged in the crucible of near disaster. On a warm spring afternoon, Arthur watched Clara stand before a newly acquired painting. 17th century landscape. "Well?" Arthur asked, playful twinkle in his eye. "What's the verdict, curator?" Clara tilted her head, studied the painting. "The light on the water is real. It feels cold like a real morning, but the signature is shouting." Arthur smiled. Genuine, unforced smile that reached his eyes. He had been saved by this little girl. Not just from a scam, but from himself. The real wealth was not in his bank accounts or on his walls. It was here in the sunshine of his home, in the sharp eyes of a brilliant child, in the quiet wisdom of knowing finally what was real. If this story touched something in you, subscribe. For more tales about truth, courage, and the unexpected heroes who save us when we need it most. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in Arthur's place. Sometimes the smallest voices speak the biggest truths.